put his badge on the line for justice.
You know the name Doug Poppa?
Yes, I do. God bless Doug Poppa, an honest cop.
I was elated, of course, but then as he testified, I was somewhat concerned for him, because I knew that they were probably going to crucify that man.
Sometimes the truth has a price. That may be the lesson of a Virginia police officer who says, in trying to do the right thing, he ended up paying for it.
The message you're sending is, see, we did it, Doug. You don't come out, you don't buck the system. No matter what the reason is, you just can basically keep your mouth shut. But if I wouldn't do it all over again, I would take the badge and I would leave it on somebody's desk and get out of police work. Because the day I can't tell the truth because somebody's pressuring me, and the day the system doesn't want me to tell the truth because somebody's pressuring me, is the day I'd leave the badge on the desk and walk away.
Poppa was fired for insubordination. One man who confronted truth and consequences.
From Las Vegas, Nevada, this is Doug Poppa, Truth and Consequences Podcast. Welcome to episode 89 for Sunday, February 6th, 2022. This is another exclusive investigative news story. According to police sources, a Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department Southeast Area Command Swing Shift Patrol Officer has been relieved of duty and is under an internal affairs investigation for allegedly having sexual encounters with a female domestic violence victim. Sources said in the last week of January, Metro Police Officer Curtis Paul, who has a pregnant fiancée at home, had responded to Sunrise Hospital to handle a domestic violence complaint. I was told that Paul then drove the female victim to the Motel 6 on Boulder Highway. Sources said after Paul ended his shift, he went back to Motel 6 in his private vehicle and met with the female victim. Later that day, sources said, Officer Curtis Paul, while on duty, in uniform, and driving his police vehicle, returned to the Motel 6 and met with the female victim again. After Paul left the female's motel room, I was told she went to the Motel 6 office, where a call was then placed to the 911 Communications Center, and from what I was told, the female reported that she was the victim of a sexual assault. In common terms, she said she was raped by Officer Paul. Not looking good at this point for Officer Paul. Even if the alleged sexual encounter was consensual, Paul was still wrong on so many levels. He compromised the domestic violence investigation by getting personally involved with the victim that he had taken the report from. If true that Paul went back to the Motel 6 the next day while he was on duty and on patrol and met with the female victim again and had a sexual encounter, the charges would be piling up. In the least, conduct unbecoming an officer. I would say dereliction of duty, because he was supposed to be on patrol keeping the community safe, but instead allegedly neglected his obligation to the Las Vegas community for personal gratification, notwithstanding the fact that his patrol sector is in a very high crime area. And of course, if the alleged sexual encounter was not consensual, now you have possible criminal charges. A cop raping a female domestic violence victim while on duty would be another black mark for the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. I heard the joke around the Southeast Area Command is how did Paul react when he heard the call go out over the radio after the 911 call was placed after he had left the Motel 6. Sources said Paul first denied to his sergeant that he was the officer involved at the Motel 6, then admitted that he was. But Paul had no choice to tell the truth at that point, because GPS coordinates, along with surveillance video from the Motel 6, would have discredited him. Now the plot thickens, folks, from what I was told. Sexual assault detail detectives then executed a search warrant at the Motel 6 room of the domestic violence victim. Sources said another search warrant and subsequent audit of Paul's cell phone indicated numerous explicit text messages between the female victim and Paul that tends to support the contention that it may not have been sexual assault, but rather consensual sex. But here's the way I look at it, folks. If this is the way it all went down, no pun intended, even if it was consensual, Officer Paul took advantage of a traumatized female domestic violence victim. However this turns out, I think Paul's police career is over. Then again, things don't always turn out the way they should with internal affairs investigations within the Las Vegas Metro Police. Depends on who you are. Paul is a rank-and-file officer and not brass. Police sources have told me for years, and I have reported on, that if you are part of the sheriff's command staff and/or a friend, and I mean all the LVMPD sheriffs, both past and present, you can get away with just about anything. Case in point is now retired Las Vegas Metro Police Officer Albert Bias. When Bias was a vice detective, he had sexual encounters with a prostitute, was suspended, then transferred back to patrol until he retired last year. Police officers who spoke to me said Bias should have been fired because other officers over the years who were brought up for similar charges lost their jobs. But Bias's career was saved by then Undersheriff Kevin McMahill, sources said, because McMahill and Bias were drinking buddies and friends. Bias's name surfaced years ago along with others in the now-defunct FBI corruption investigation of the Vice Unit, where allegations were raised that certain police detectives were on the payroll of a Las Vegas pimp. No police officers were ever charged in that case, even though there were witnesses to the alleged payoffs. Sheriffs and other high-ranking police officials protecting their friends and themselves in some cases, abusing their authority. That has been the so-called leadership within the Las Vegas Metro Police, leaders with no morals or ethics. The public has a right to know when one of their police officers abuses their authority. On February 1st, I sent a media request for comment to the Las Vegas Metro Police Public Information Office. That request went unanswered, as did another one on February 3rd. I didn't really expect an answer, because like I said in previous episodes, Sheriff Joe Lombardo, who runs the Las Vegas Metro Police, according to sources, told his Public Information Office not to acknowledge me. I think that's pretty funny, as I have been breaking news stories and exposing Lombardo's cover-ups time and again. I am an independent investigative journalist and former law enforcement officer. My investigative body of work over the years speaks for itself, whether I was writing for the Baltimore Post-Examiner or now on my podcast series, Truth and Consequences. The cop who still lives inside of me wants very much for all of what I was told to be false. Why, you ask? Because when any law enforcement officer engages in conduct that disgraces the badge, it adversely affects the reputation of the entire force. In an upcoming episode, you will hear from a retired NYPD detective who discusses his time in the Internal Affairs Division. That will be an eye-opener. Truth and Consequences with Doug Poppa will have more stories related to the unsolved 2016 Land Kaufman double homicide and cover-ups involving Sheriff Joe Lombardo and his former Undersheriff Kevin McMahill, all forthcoming and much more. Thanks for listening, folks, and remember to hit the red subscribe button on the YouTube channel and support my work if you can at paypal.me/Doug Poppa. I am self-funded. Audio episodes are available on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Radio Public, and other platforms. Thanks for listening.